Okay, so in the previous class, what we had studied was we had studied pre-tensioning systems, right? Pre-tensioning systems, wherein we studied this Hoyer long line method, right? We studied this Hoyer long line system, Hoyer long line system. This we had studied in the previous class, right? In this class, what we will study is we will study various post-tensioning systems, various post-tensioning systems that are used. So before we get into those post-tensioning system, which are four in number, those are very interesting and very unique. Each of them are very unique. So before we get into that, we will just look into a few things, a few important things related to post-tensioning, right? We will look into a few things related post-tensioning, and once we are done with that, we will look into post-tensioning systems that we are going to use. So they are namely they are four number of post-tensioning systems, and we will study all four of them. So before we get into that details, what we will do, we will just look into this post-tensioning, a few details of post-tensioning. So coming to stages of post-tensioning, you can see in the figure, the first thing is your casting of your concrete. First step in your stages of your post-tensioning is casting of your concrete, right? We cast your concrete, and during casting we place a duct, right? We place a duct, and what that duct does is, after your concrete has hardened, we can pass our pre-stressing steel or your steel tendons through those ducts, which can be later tensioned. Okay, so in post tensioning, as the name suggests, we tension the steel after the concrete has hardened. Okay, and in pre tensioning, what was the case? In pre tensioning, we tension the steel before the concrete is placed. Okay, we tension the steel and then pour the concrete. So that was in pre tensioning. Under post tensioning, we tension the steel after the concrete has hardened. So you can see there is a horizontal duct which is placed in the first figure. Okay, so the duct can be horizontal, and we can have many profiles for your duct because it is placed during because it is placed before the concrete is poured in your formwork, right? So duct can have various profiles as per your BMD, as per your loading. Okay, so let me just draw and tell you and draw and show you how your profiles can be. So this is one profile wherein you have a horizontal duct. Okay, so if you want, you can have this kind of inclined duct, right? Inclined, and then it goes straight, and then again it will go inclined up to your end. So this can be one profile. So coming to one more profile, let me just draw. You can have a parabolic type of duct wherein it is following a curved path like this, having a parabolic curve. So this can be your duct, profile of your duct. Okay, so instead not only straight, but you can have various forms of profile for your ducts based on your loads and based on your BMD, right? Based on the BMD of your beam or your element, your profile of your duct is determined. And as per the duct profile, your pre-stressing tendon is also following the same profile. Okay, uh, so that is one thing in which is advantageous in your post tensioning. Okay, so you can have various kinds of profile for your duct. So these are a few stages which I have shown you, and you can see one side there is anchor, one side there is anchor, and then the other side you have a jack and which pulls your pre-stressing steel. And later when you have acquired the required amount of pre-stress and the required amount of stretching, what you can do, you can apply your anchor. So you can these are the these are the stages of your post tensioning which I have explained briefly. Okay, so you need a casting bed, right? You need a casting bed, then you need jacks, you need anchors, and you need formwork for your concrete placing, right? So these are a few requirements and few devices which you require for post tensioning. Okay, so let us just go into details. So in post-tensioning systems, the ducts for the tendons or strands are placed along with the reinforcement before the casting of concrete, right? So before the casting of concrete, your ducts are placed in your formwork, and then your concrete is poured. So unlike pre-tensioning, tendons are pulled with the reaction against the hardened concrete, right? So so you can see the anchor is here, and when we pull your pre-stressing steel, it generates reaction against your concrete at your ends, right? So that is how your pre-stressing is transferred to your concrete. So it is the tendons are pulled with reaction acting against the hardened concrete itself. Against the concrete, your reaction forces are generated. Remember that. So next, if the ducts are filled with grout, okay, so when we place our tendons, we tension, and then later on, after the tensioning is done, what we do, if we grout those ducts, if we fill the space between your tendons and your concrete, fill the hole, we fill your duct with grout, okay. If we fill that with grout, it is known as bonded post tensioning. It is known as what? It is known as bonded post tensioning. If your ducts are filled with grout, it is known as bonded post tensioning. So grout is what is a grout? So if you ask me what is a grout, grout is nothing but a cement paste. It is a cement paste or a sand cement mortar. Okay, sand cement mortar containing suitable admixture. Okay, so that is grout. So coming to second type is your unbonded post tensioning. Unbonded. If we have learned what is bonded post tensioning, now we will look into unbonded post tensioning. So as the name suggests, the ducts are never grouted. So the ducts, if they are not grouted, so they come under unbonded post tensioning, and the tendon is held in tension solely by the end anchorages. Okay, so since there is no bond and there is no contact between your concrete and your steel, then what happens? The tendon are held in tension solely or mainly by the end anchorages. As you can see in this image, the tendons are held together by the end anchorages, and they are not held together by any bond, okay, in post tensioning. So under unbonded post tensioning, as the name suggests, the ducts are never grouted and the tendons are held in place by end anchorages. So this is the two types, that is bonded post tensioning and unbonded post tensioning. So let us just summarize the various stages of post tensioning. That is first is what we do is cast your concrete, and before casting, what we do, we have ducts in place. Okay, we place our ducts, we place our concrete, then we pass our tendons through the ducts. Then the third step is placement of anchorage block and jacks. Okay, so placement of anchorage block on one side and placement of jack on other side. And what is the fourth step? Fourth step is applying tension to the tendons. Applying tension to the tendons. Then the fifth step is seating of wedges. Okay, we will understand how that wedges are seated. Okay, in the next pages that are coming. So seating of wedges is how you anchor your tendons, right? How you hold your tendons in place, and how you do not allow them to slip. Okay, so that is how what we will learn in the next part. So coming to the last step is cutting of your tendons, right? Extra part or extra tendons which are there are cut and they are finished off. So these are a few stages of post tensioning operation. Okay, so coming to your next part. So I have told you wedges are used for anchoring, right? Wedges are used for anchoring. You can see in this image, you can see in the image wedges, steel wedges are there. Steel wedges, I am showing you steel wedges. So you can see they are not a single piece of steel. They are not a single piece of steel, but they are three pieces which are joined together. You can see a slit over here. You can see a slit over here and a slit over here. So they are three pieces of steel which are joined together by this rubber rings. Okay, you can see a rubber ring over here, and they are held in place by these rubber rings. Okay, they are three pieces held together by these rubber rings. So these are wedges. Okay, and you can see they are having a conical shape. You can see they are not cylindrical in shape, they are conical in shape. They have tapered end. Okay, they have tapered, and this diameter is smaller and this diameter is larger. So they have a tapered type of conical shape. Okay, so you can see they are made of steel. Okay, and inside you can see there are teeth. You can see here inside, you can see they have teeth inside. So what that teeth will do is it will hold your steel. It will catch hold of your steel and it will not allow them to slip. So this wedge can open and it can allow your steel to pass in one direction, right? You can pass your steel in this direction. Steel you can pass in this direction. What will happen is your steel wedges will open up as it is made up of three pieces, right? It is made up of three steel pieces. It will open up and it will allow your steel to pass in this direction. But once you pull it in this direction and tension it, and once you release your tensioning, it will not allow your steel to get back in your concrete. It will not allow it to slip in back in this direction. It will hold it in this whatever direction you have pulled, and it will not allow it to go to. It will not allow your steel to go back inside, okay, in the other direction. So it will allow you to tension. So this is one example and image you can see of a steel wedge, various steel wedges you can see. So in this image you can see it. This is called the male part. Okay, this is the male part, and this male part is going into your female part. That is your cylinder. You can see this is your cylinder. This is a cylinder, and this is your wedge. Okay, this is your wedges, and this is the direction in which your steel wedges are. In your steel tendons are tensioned. Okay, in this direction they are pulled. Okay, and you can see in this cross section, this is a steel wedge, and this is your cylinder. This is your cylinder, and these are your steel wedges. And you can see a strand is passed, and thus how your steel wedges open up and your steel strand can be passed. So in this 3D image also you can see steel strand is passed, and it is allowed to pass in this direction, but your steel wedge will not allow your steel tendon to pass in this direction. So it will hold your steel tendon in place. So these steel wedges have teeth, as I've shown you. It will have some teeth which will hold this steel wire or your steel strand. So in this image you can see there are these teeth which you can see over here, and what that will do is it will hold your steel in place. So in this also you can see, in this image you can see this steel wedge is made up of three pieces, one, two, and three pieces. Okay, and this is the side view, wherein you can see it is a conical shape having tapered one end, tapered at one end. And you can see in this image you can see it has teeth which hold your steel in place and does not allow it to slip. Okay, so this is how your wedges are, and how they act, and how they do not allow you to, how they do not allow your steel to slip, and how they anchor your steel in place. So coming to this image, you can see this is your duct, right? This is your duct, and this is called a trumpet. Trumpet. It is just like a trumpet shape, so it is called a trumpet or a cone. Okay, so and this is your anchorage plate. Anchorage plate is usually inside your concrete. So this part is inside your concrete. Okay, this part is inside your concrete, and this part is outside your concrete. So anchorage plate is usually placed inside your concrete to bear the forces coming from your wedges. Okay, to bear the forces coming from your wedges. So these are a wedge plate. Okay, the wedge plate, and these are individual wedges. Okay, one, two, three, and four. These are individual wedges you can see, and individual wedge you can see here. So these four number of wedges are placed here, and four number of strands they are holding in place. Four number of strands they are holding in place. So what these cap can be applied later on. Cap, that is your grout cap, can be applied, and you can see there is a gap that is provided here, right? A port which is provided here, which can allow your grout to pass. Okay, so this is called the grout injection port, wherein you can put a grouting machine, a nozzle over here, and you can pass your grout inside, and you can grout your duct. Okay, so this part is called your grout injection port. So this is just an general example of how your anchorage plates and your wedges are held in place in your end blocks. Okay, so this is a grout cap and your individual wedges, and your individual wedges are held together by your in the wedge plate, and inside you have an anchor plate, and you have a trumpet or a cone, and then you have a duct, and you have a grout injection port which is provided, which can help you for grouting later on. Okay, for your bonded type of post tensioning. So this is a general explanation of how your wedges are, and how they are made, and how they hold your steel in place, or how they anchor your steel. Okay, so this is about anchorages. So coming to one more image, you can see in this image also, you can see this is the cylinder, this part is your cylinder, and inside is, you can see how it is the shape of your wedge itself, right? Inside of a cylinder, the shape is tapered, right? It is the shape of your wedge. It is the shape of your wedge, so that when your wedge gets inside your cylinder, it is held into tightly in place. It is held tightly in place by friction. Okay, so this is your steel barrel or your cylinder, and this is how your steel wedges open up when you want to pass, and when you pull it in this direction, it will just lock up, it will just close, it will just lock up in your cylinder, right? It will just lock up and it will not allow your steel tendon to pass in this direction. Okay, it will allow your steel tendon to pass in this direction while tensioning, but it will not allow your steel tendon to pass in the opposite direction. It will hold it in place, it will anchor your steel tendon. Okay, so this is one more image wherein you can have an idea of how your wedge action takes place. So this is a 3D image of your anchorage. You can see these are individual wedges. You can see, right, individual wedges. You can see here. So many number of wedges are there, and these wedges are holding individual strands. Okay, and you can see your grout port is provided here. Grouting port is provided here so that you can grout on later. And this is your duct, right? This is your duct, and this is your trumpet. So you can see from your front, this is how your anchorage plate looks like. You can see many number of wedges are there, many number of wedges holding your strands. So, and this is your side cross section. You can see this is the duct, this is your trumpet, this is your grout port which is provided so that you can grout and pass your cement paste later and grout your duct. And these are individual wedges. You can see 1, 2, and 3 number. And this is your cover or your cap which is provided. Okay, so this is an example of how your anchorage looks like. I hope this is clear, and we will move on to your next part, that is we will look into a few advantages of post tensioning. So there are a few advantages of post tensioning. You know, a few advantages like post tensioning is suitable for heavy cast in place members. It is suitable for heavy cast in place members. Whenever we have cast in situ members, like whenever we have not precast members but elements which are casted on site. So for those type of structures, your post tensioning is very suitable. Okay, and whenever we have heavy cast in place members, post tensioning is very suitable for them. Okay, and whenever we have bridges, right, I have told you, for whether it is a flyover, whether it is a metro bridge, whether it is a flyover, right, whether it is a water bridge passing over waterway. So most of those are usually your post tensioning bridges. Okay, so post tensioning bridges. And coming to your second advantage of post tensioning, you can see the waiting period in your casting bed is lesser compared to your pre tensioning. In your pre tensioning, it was a disadvantage wherein you have to wait until the concrete hardens, right? Until your concrete hardens, attains certain amount of strength. You cannot just remove your concrete from your precast bed, right? So waiting period is more in your pre-tensioning, and your waiting period is lesser in post-tensioning. Coming to your third advantage, the transfer of pre-stress is independent of transmission length. Okay, so understand this, the transfer of pre-stress is independent of your transmission length. So in your pre-tensioning, the transfer of your pre-stress, the transfer of your pre-stress was by bond, okay, was by bond over your transmission length. Whatever the length that was in contact with concrete, whatever steel length was in contact with concrete, that was your transmission length, and your transfer of pre-stress was by bond. So that is not the case over here. So it is independent of a transmission length. Whatever is your length of your steel, it is independent of that. So post tensioning, the transfer of pre-stress is independent of transmission length. And here in post tensioning, the transfer of pre-stress is occurring by end anchorages, solely by end anchorages, right? The steel is held in place by end blocks, right, at the ends of your concrete, and not by bond. Okay, so this is one advantage, is it is independent of your transmission length. So we know whenever there are some advantages, there must be some disadvantages or limitations. So coming to your disadvantages of post tensioning, we can see there is only one. So the relative disadvantage of post tensioning as compared to pre tensioning is the requirement of anchorage devices and grouting equipment, right? So post tensioning requires anchorage devices because because your steel is held in place by anchorages. So we need anchorage devices which need to be properly designed and which need to be strong and should be good quality. So these anchorage devices we need. So that is one requirement, extra requirement compared to your pre-tensioning, wherein we do not require any anchorage devices in your pre-tensioning. And what we need is when we are having bonded tendons, we have to grout our duct. So we need grouting equipment, we need special grouting equipment, right? So these are your extra things and your extra requirements which are there in your post tensioning. So this comes under disadvantage compared to your pre-tensioning. Compared to your pre-tensioning, this can be a disadvantage. That is requirement of anchorage devices and grouting equipment. Let me just show you how the grouting equipment looks like. So grouting. So what is grouting? Grouting can be defined as filling of your duct. Okay, it can be defined as filling of your duct with a material that provides an anti-corrosive alkaline environment, meaning it provides an anti-corrosive environment so that your pre-stressing steel does not corrode. So that is why we provide grout, so that your steel does not come in contact with your environment. It does not come in contact with your moisture from your environment. So that is why we grout. Okay. And also it provides a strong bond between tendon and the surrounding grout. Okay. It provides a strong bond between tendons and the surrounding grout. So this is how your grouting machine looks like. Okay, just an example of how your grouting machine looks like. So you can see at the right side, you can see here anchoring units. You can see various ways in which you can have your anchorages. So you can see it starts with three number of tendons. It starts with three number of tendons and goes up to 55 number of tendons. You can see you can have up to 55 number of tendons and various arrangements of your tendons. You can see how depending upon your design and depending upon your loads and stresses, various types of arrangement can be done. You can see various types of arrangements can be done in this fashion. Okay, so coming to devices which are essential for post tensioning. Okay, so coming to devices, first and foremost thing that you require is a casting bed, right? Casting bed for casting of your concrete, right? First thing that we do is casting of your concrete. Okay, so first thing is what we do is casting of our concrete. So for that we need a casting bed, and what we need shuttering or we need molds. So that is your first pre-requirement. Then after that we need ducts, right? We need to ducts to be placed in your mold. We need ducts. Then after that we need anchoring devices, right? At one side we need anchoring devices, and at the other side what we require jacks, right? We require jacks for pulling your or tensioning your tendons. Then your next requirement is couplers, right? It is an optional thing wherein couplers are devices which are required for attaching two steel wires or two steel tendons. Couplers are required wherein when you want to attach two steel tendons or when you want to join two steel wires, we need these couplers. Okay, so next thing is your grouting equipment. Whenever we want bonded post tensioning, what we need is we need this grouting equipment. Okay, so these are optional. Your couplers and your grouting equipment are optional and they are not compulsorily required. Okay, so these are a few devices which are required or which are essential for post tensioning. So after this, what we need to study is we need to study post tensioning systems. Okay, post tensioning, post tensioning PT systems. So this is the next topic that we need to study. That is under post tensioning, we have these four systems. Okay, these four. There are many other systems also, but these four systems are important with respect to your syllabus. From your syllabus point of view, these four are important. So we will study these four systems. So you can see there are four systems. Your first system is a Freycinet system. Freycinet system. Second system is a Magnel Blaton system. Magnel Blaton system. Third is your Gifford Udall system. Gifford Udall system. Fourth is your Lee McCall system. Lee McCall system. So all of these are named before they are respective engineers or respective scientists, what you call, who have developed this system. They have named these systems with their names. Okay, so Freycinet, coming to your first type of post tensioning system, that is your Freycinet system. Freycinet, and this is an important one. Okay, Freycinet. So among post-tensioning systems, Freycinet system is introduced firstly of all the other systems. So Freycinet, as you know, Freycinet is known as your father of PSC also. So they have so Freycinet has developed say a post-tensioning system, and mainly these post-tensioning systems, right? Mainly these post-tensioning systems deal with deal with how you anchor your tendons, how you anchor your steel wires. So mainly they present a method or a technique of how you pass your tendons and how you anchor them in place after tensioning. So these four systems give different kind of methods and techniques of how you anchor your tendons in place. Okay, so this deals with that. So coming to first system, that is Freycinet system. In this, what you have is you have high tension steel wires of diameter varying from 5 mm to 8 mm. Okay, so you do not have a constant wire diameter. You have various steel wires having varying diameters ranging from 5 mm going up to 8 mm. Okay, so and 12 number of wires are properly arranged to form a group. Remember, 12 number of wires are required, and the wire diameters may be ranging from 5 mm to 8 mm. So yeah, if you just look into this image, you will understand. This is called the fluted cone. Okay, this is called the fluted cone, and you can see there are grooves on this cone. Okay, grooves provided on this cone which will hold your steel wires. Okay, hold your steel wires or your strands. Okay, so this is your anchorage with the steel spirals, right? These anchorage are wrapped around circumferentially by your steel spirals, okay, by steel wires. They are wrapped around circumferentially in spiral. And this is your duct former, duct which is held by your anchorage at your end. So what we do is we tension all these steel strands or your wires coming, which are 12 in number, usually 12 in number, and we stretch or we tension them simultaneously. All of those wires are tensioned simultaneously, right? So all of those are tensioned simultaneously by using this Freycinet double acting jacks. Okay, by using the Freycinet double acting jacks, all of the wires are tensioned at a time. Remember this. This is important. So using Freycinet double acting jacks, we tension all the wires or all the strands at a time. And as I've told you, we provide circumferential reinforcement like this. We have provided circumferential reinforcement for your anchorage. In this next image, you can see there is this spiral reinforcement or a circumferential reinforcement which is provided. It is going in circle like this in spiral shape. In spiral shape, it is going like this. Okay, remember. So, and this is your fluted cone, right? Fluted cone. And you can see this hole which is provided in your center of this fluted cone allows you for passing your grout later on, right? Your tube for injecting cement grout. This central hole, we can pass our grout on later on, and we can do our grouting action. So this is your fluted cone, and you can see once your steel wires are pulled and they're tensioned, this fluted cone is placed inside. It is pushed inside, and it is placed in this fashion. Okay, and what that does is it will hold your steel wires. It will these steel wires, you can see, which are usually 12 in number. They are held in place. Okay, they will not slip. They will not slip back again into your concrete. They will be held in place by this fluted cone by friction. Okay, so this is your duct, right? This is your duct, and this is your sheeting, which is your cover, which is provided. Sheeting, which is cover, which is provided right above and below or all around. Then this is your anchoring cone, right? Anchoring cone. This is your fluted cone. This is your fluted cone, which you can see here. This is your fluted cone. And then this is your wedge cone, right? Wedge cone or a fluted cone. And this is your spiral reinforcement. Spiral reinforcement, you can see here. Spiral reinforcement for added strength, added strength. So this is how your Fresnel system is. Okay. So this is how a Fresnel system is. Coming to advantages of Fresnel system. Advantages of Fresnel system. So securing wires is not the expensive process. So secure wire, it is not very expensive as it suggests. Your first advantages, it is not very expensive compared to to your other processes of post tensioning systems. This system is not very expensive. So this is one advantage of Fresnel system. So coming to your second advantage, the plug if properly placed in concrete, meaning this cone or your plug, which they are calling this fluted cone, right? This fluted cone, if it is placed properly in concrete, it does not project beyond the ends of the member, right? As you can see over here, it is properly placed inside your concrete. It is pushed and it is properly placed in your concrete. So it is flush. It is flush with this concrete surface. It is not projecting outside. So what we can do, we can just cut the steel strands which are projecting outside, and we will have a smooth surface, which we will have a plain surface. We will have no projections outside, right? So that is one advantage. It does not have any projections. This system, if your cone is placed properly inside a concrete, it will give a plain surface. There will be no projections outside. So this is one advantage of your Fresnel system. Coming to disadvantages, we can see there are more disadvantages than advantages of your Fresnel system. So coming to your first disadvantage, as I've told you, all the wires are stretched together, right? All the 12 wires or your strands are stretched together at a time by using your Fresnel double acting jacks. So what happens? There are stresses which are developed in the steel wires, right? When we stretch them or we tension them at once, the stresses which are developed are not same in all the wires. They are not same in all the wires. So that is one disadvantage. So what we need is, we need all the wires or all your strands to be equally stressed, equally stressed. But when we stress them at a time, in as in this system, what happens is they are not having the same amount of stress. All the wires will not have the same amount of stress. Some will have more stress, some will have less amount of stress. So that is not an ideal situation. So this is one disadvantage of your Fresnel system. Coming to your second disadvantage, you can see the greatest stretching force which can be applied, meaning the stress we can apply to your tendons is in the range of 200 kilonewton to 500 kilonewton, right? It is not stress, it is force. Okay, so the greatest stretching force that we can apply to your tendons is in the range of 200 kilonewton to 500 kilonewton. And as we can see, it is not very sufficient in many of the cases. It is not sufficient. This Fresnel system is very old, right? It is very old. It is one of the first post tensioning systems. So at that time, this system was it was applicable, but in nowadays this amount of stretching, that is in the range of 250 kilonewton to 500 kilonewton, is not enough. So this is coming now in your disadvantage of your Fresnel system. Coming to your next, that is your third disadvantage, that is your jacks. As I've told you, we need special jacks, that is your Fresnel double acting jacks, and these jacks are very heavy and very expensive. Okay, so there are many practical difficulties that are associated with it. So these jacks come under your disadvantage of your Fresnel system. So this is about your Fresnel system, which is your first system in your post tensioning. So this is an important system, and which you have to explain in detail. Okay. So after your Fresnel system, there was a second system which was developed. Second system, which was your Magnel-Blaton system. You can see the second system is your Magnel-Blaton system. Magnel-Blaton system, wherein the difference between your Fresnel system and your Magnel-Blaton system is that two wires are stretched at a time. So in Fresinet system, the thing was you stretched all your wires at a time, right? The 12 number of wires you stretched at a time. But in Magnell-Blatten system, only two wires are stretched at a time. Okay, so this method was introduced by the famous engineer Professor Magnell of Belgium. Okay, so all of these systems are named after their inventors. Okay, so this is invented by Professor Magnell, who was an engineer. So and they've named this system after him. So Magnell-Blatten system. Uh, Coming to the next point. So in this system, the anchorage device, you're right, the anchorage device consists of sandwich plate. Okay, consists of sandwich plate having grooves to hold the wires and wedges, which are also grooved. So it consists of a sandwich plate, and each of the sandwich plate can hold two wires. Okay, can hold two wire, and right, and totally it can hold around 8 wires. Okay, your sandwich plate can hold totally around 8 wires. I will show an image wherein after seeing this image you will have an understanding of how this system works. Okay, so this is your sandwich plate. Okay, this is your plate in your Magnell-Blatten which they use. Okay, and this is your wedge. Okay, so this wedge goes inside in this gap which is provided here, you can see. So this wedge is a tapered one, and you can see the gap which is here is also a tapered one, which is exactly the size of this wedge. Okay, so it fits in exactly in this space over here. So you can see here in this image, you can see they have placed your wedge, and you can see there is groove over here. You can see there is a groove over here, and there is a groove over here. So what that groove is, so that you can place your pre-stressing steel wire through here, through this groove. So in this example, you can see here, you can see that through that grooves, and by using the wedge, you can say you can anchor two number of wires in each groove. So in this is one groove and this is one groove. So in each of your groove or your gap, you can see two number of steel wires can be held in place. You can stretch two number of wires and you can hold it in place by using this wedge. Okay, so two number of wires here, two number of wires here, and below you can see there is a gap or a groove provided. So you can have two number of wires here and two number of wires here below. So totally you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8. So in each sandwich plate, you have 8 number of wires that you can place and you can hold in anchorage. So each plate can have 8 number of wires. So that is what is explained here. So each plate carries 8 wires, remember. Okay, so the cable consists of wires in multiples of 8. So you can have multiples of 8s, like you can have multiple plates which are going below this. You can have one more plate, you can have one more plate besides here. So you can have multiple plates, and each plate has 8 number of wires. So you can go up to 84 wires you can hold in place by using this method. You can go up to 84 wires, remember this. And each of the adjacent layers are separated by a clearance of 4 mm, remember. So each of these plate are separated by a clearance of 4 mm, remember this. So coming to next thing, so yeah, specially devised jacks are used. Specially just devised jacks are used, and are two wires are stretched and anchored at a time. Okay, not all the wires, only two wires. Two wires are stretched and anchored at a time. Okay, so this is the main difference between Fresinet system and Magnell-Blatten, wherein in Fresinet system you have all the wires are stretched at a time and they are anchored, but in this system only two wires are stretched and anchored, and here you use sandwich plate. Okay, you use sandwich plates, and there you have fluted cone. Okay, fluted cones. So remember the difference between these two systems. Okay, so this was about your Magnell-Blatten system, which was very easy, right? Very easy to understand. Now coming to your next system, that is Gifford-Udall system. Okay, so this system was originated in Great Britain, and it is widely used in India. Okay, remember it was it originally was invented, or it was technique was technique was made in your Great Britain, but it is widely used in India. So in this system, this is a single wire system. Okay, this is a single wire system in which in this each wire is stretched independently. I have highlighted the statement. You can see each wire is stretched independently. In your Fresnel system, all of them were stretched in at a time. In your Magnell-Blatten system, the two wires were stretched at a time. But in Gifford-Udall system, each wire is stretched independently. Okay, using double acting jacks, we stress our wires individually and we anchor them. So this is earliest method, and in this method wires are stressed and anchored one by one in separate cylinder using wedging grips. Okay, using wedging grips called Udall grips. So you can see this grip. You can see this is a cylinder and this is your wedge. So your wedge consists of two parts. Okay, not three parts but two parts. Okay, so this is your bearing plate. You can see there is a bearing plate which is provided here, right? And then this bearing plate is sitting on your thrust ring, and this thrust ring is usually embedded in concrete. Okay, embedded in concrete. So your forces from your steel pre-stressing wire is transferred to your bearing plate, and then it is transferred to your thrust ring. Okay, remember this. So this wedge is made up of two parts. Okay, and you can pass your individual wire through this wedge and you can anchor them in place. I have told you how this wedge action takes place and how they hold your steel in place. So your split wedge, you can see your wedge can hold your individual wire in place, and it is made up of two parts. Okay, so the duct is encircled by a helix. Okay, so your duct is encircled by a helix. You can see in this image, this helix is provided. A steel spiral is provided, or a helix is provided for extra strength of your end bearing. Because at your end bearings you have enormous amount of stress which is developed. There is a lot of stress concentration. So to provide extra strength to your concrete, what we do, we provide this helical reinforcement which goes around your duct, okay, or your trumpet or your cone. So this provides extra strength. So this is your thrust plate, as I have told you. This is your helical reinforcement. This is your trumpet, and individual strands you can see, or individual wires are anchored in place by using your wedge grips. So this is how your Gifford-Udall system works. Okay, Gifford-Udall system works. So each grip consists of two half cones, right? I have told you your wedge consists of two parts and not three parts, two half cones, and then you pass your steel through those wedges and you tension them. And once you tension them, you can place this wedge and you can hold your steel in place and you can anchor them. So this is about your Gifford-Udall system, wherein it is a single wire system, wherein each wire is stressed independently and held in place by this Udall grips. Okay, what we call as Udall grips. So coming to your next system, that is your Lee-McCall system, or your fourth and your last system in your post-tensioning system, your Lee-McCall system. So this is very easy system, wherein it is very easy to understand, and this system is usually used for high tensile steel bars. Okay, it is usually used for high tensile steel bars. It is not used for steel wires, or it is not used for steel strands. It is used for steel bars. Okay, so these steel bars are usually of diameter 22 mm, 25 mm, 28 mm, and going up to 30 mm in diameter. Okay, and they can go up to a length of 20 meters. So bars are having larger diameter. So what they do is, at the ends, right? At the ends, you have these threads which are provided at the ends. So your steel bars are having these threads at your ends. So what these threads help in, after you tension, what we can do, we can just put screws, right? We can put screw or we can put nuts, and we can hold your steel in place, right? And we can anchor them. So that is how you anchor your steel bars using Lee McCall system. Your anchor bars are done. Anchoring of your bars is done by screwing special threaded nuts. Okay, so this is your nut. This is your nut. This is your threads. You can see your threaded threads are put on your steel bar, and once you tension and pull your stretch your steel bar, what we do, we just simply put our nut and we anchor your steel bars. So what we have is we have bearing plates, right? Bearing plates to transfer your load or your stress from your nut to your concrete, right? To distribute your load over a larger area. Also, we can have a grouting port, which is shown here, grouting port, so that you can grout your duct later on. So that is there. So this is a simple system wherein you have threads on your bars, and once you stretch them, what we can do, we can simply put a nut and we can tighten them against your bearing plate, and that is how your steel bars are anchored, right? So this is your Lee McCall system, very easy, right? Very easy Lee McCall system. So if you have any doubts in any of the system, any of the four systems, right, you can just let me know and I will explain. If you have any doubts, you can type in chat or you can unmute and you can ask me. If not, what we will do is we will move to your next topic. We will move to your next topic, that is properties of your high strength concrete. Properties of your high strength concrete. So I will give you 2 minutes, right? It is 1:24. We will start at
Hello.
1:26. Yes,
Sir, can you please explain the fourth one in short? I lost my internet
Shri,
connection.
yes, what I will do is I will just explain briefly what this Lee McCall system is.
Yeah.
Okay, so in Lee McCall system, what we do is we do not use any steel wires or steel strands, right? We do not use steel wires or steel strands. This system is specifically for steel bars, right? Steel bars. So steel bars are having a diameter ranging from 22 mm going up to 30 mm, right? So since these diameter are large, what we can do, we can just have a threads on them, like you have on a screw, right? Threads you have on a screw. The same way you have threads on your steel bar. You can see at the ends you have threads which are provided. So what we can do is after you tension your steel bar, what we can do is we can just you can just screw your nut, you can put your nut and you can hold it in place by using this nut and your bearing plates. So you can just apply your nut through this threads which are there on your bars, and you can hold your steel bar in place. So that is how you anchor in your Lee McCall system. And also there are bearing plates which are provided so that your forces from your anchoring your forces are distributed over a large area of your concrete. So bearing plate is provided, and you can see in your image you have a threaded bar, and you have a spherical bearing nut, you have your bearing plates, and you have a grouting port which is provided, grouting port which is optional. If you want to grout, you provide this grouting port so that you can grout your duct later on. So this is how your Lee McCall system works, right? So all of this system give you how give you a technique or give you a method of how you can anchor your post tensioning bars, right? So all of this system give you an method or a technique for how you can anchor your bars in place after post tensioning. So these techniques are given by each of these scientists or engineers, and they are named after them. So your first system is your Fresinet system. Your second system is a Magnell-Blatten system. Third is your Gifford-Udall, and fourth is Lee McCall. So if if others have any kind of doubt, you can ask. You can type in chat, or you can just unmute and you can ask. And if not, what we will do is we will move on to your next topic, which is properties of your concrete. Okay, so I think no, all of these four systems are clear to you. And what we will do is we will move to your next topic, that is in your syllabus they have mentioned properties of high strength concrete and properties of high strength steel. We have to study this along with your stress strain curves, So this is your next topic which you have to cover. So let me just present the next screen. Okay, so I hope you can see the screen which I have shared. And coming to properties of hardened concrete, right? We are dealing with properties after your concrete has hardened, okay, and not in fresh state. So we are mainly dealing with properties of hardened concrete and not of your concrete in fresh state. So your concrete in pre-stressed application has to be of good quality, right? Because your concrete has to react and has to bear all these forces and stresses which it comes across, right? We pre-stress, we pre-compress, we apply pre-stress. So all these pre-compressive forces and all your loads coming from your service, right? All those that it has to handle. So your concrete in pre-stress has to be of good quality, and it requires some properties, right? It should have some properties. And what are those properties? So your first and foremost property is it should have high strength, right? It should have high strength with low water to cement ratio. Remember, it should have low water to cement ratio, because if you have high water to cement ratio, there will be more shrinkage and there will be more creep which will be occurring. So we need to avoid this shrinkage and creep. So we will deal with this shrinkage and creep as we go on in this topic later on. So we will understand why we need to avoid this shrinkage and creep. So to avoid the shrinkage and creep, what we need to do is we need to keep our water to cement ratio low, and we need to have high strength. Okay, so this is one important property of our concrete, or an attribute which our concrete should have. So coming to your next important thing is it should be durable, right? It should be durable. So it should have durability with the low permeability and minimum cement content. It should have minimum cement content, and it should have proper compaction and curing. Okay, so these are required for good durability properties. Okay, so what is the thing is, as your structure ages, as your structure starts to age, there is problems which occur, right? There you can see cracks, you can see moisture ingress in your concrete, right? So what we need to do after all these things occur, we need to repair and rehabilitate your structure. So that repair and rehabilitation costs you a lot, right? So to avoid all those things, what we need to do, we need to make our structure more durable. So we need to make a structure more durable. So that is one important property of our concrete. It should be durable. So coming to your third property, as I have told you, your shrinkage and your creep should be kept minimum. Your shrinkage and creep should be kept minimum. And how that can be kept minimum? By limiting your cement content, right? By limiting your cement content and by keeping your water to cement ratio low. By doing these two, what happens is we can minimize our shrinkage and creep. So these are a few important attributes that our concrete should have. And coming to your first property of your hardened concrete, that is your strength. Strength is the main and the first property that we need to study of our concrete. So for pre-stressed concrete applications, high strength concrete is required for the following reasons. Okay, we require high strength concrete for your pre-stressed concrete applications. So what are the requirements? Why do we require high strength concrete? Because to sustain the high stresses at anchorage regions. So at anchorage regions, there is a lot of stress concentrations, right? Especially in post tensioning. Because your steel tendon is held solely by end anchorages. So there is lot of stress concentration which is occurring at your end anchorage regions. So to sustain those high stresses, what we need is we need high strength concrete. So that is one reason why we need high strength concrete, especially in your uh, post tension systems. Okay, so coming to your second point, to have higher resistance to compression, tension, shear, and bond. Right, your pre-stressed concrete has a lot of compression. Right, we apply pre-compression to your concrete, and there is a development of tension. It should not develop tension, right? Your PSC members are usually tension free members, wherein there is no tension throughout your section. So it should be able to resist all of this. It should be able to resist your compression forces. It should be able to resist tension forces, shear forces, and it should have good bond. Okay, so for all these reasons, we require high strength concrete. So coming to your third reason is to have high stiffness for reduced deflection. So what happens is we need lesser amount of deflection when it comes for pre-stressed concrete application. So we need lesser deflection. So whenever we need less deflection, we need to have higher stiffness. So if stiffness is higher, your deflection is lesser. Okay, if stiffness is higher, deflection is lesser. So how do you attain higher stiffness? To attain higher stiffness, we need high strength concrete. Okay, so to attain higher stiffness, and so that we have lesser deflection, we need high strength concrete. So coming to your fourth point, we need high strength concrete to have reduced shrinkage cracks. Okay, shrinkage cracks start occurring in your concrete after certain amount of drying. Okay, after certain amount of time and after certain amount of drying, there will be shrinkage cracks which will be occurring, and these shrinkage cracks are very deleterious to your PSC, to your pre-stressed concrete, to your pre-stress which we have applied. So we have to avoid this shrinkage and creep which is occurring in your concrete. We have to avoid shrinkage and creep. So to avoid your shrinkage and creep, what we have to do, we have to use high strength concrete. We need to use high strength concrete to minimize our shrinkage and creep. So these are a few reasons why we require high strength concrete in our pre-stressed concrete. In our pre-stressed concrete, why we require high strength concrete, I have explained you 4 points which are important. Okay, so these are coming under strength of concrete. So coming to your compressive strength, your first is your compressive strength. We will study compressive strength of your concrete. So how do you determine the characteristic compressive strength of your concrete? How do you determine the characteristic compressive strength? By casting 150 cubes, right? You cast 150 cubes and you test them after 28 days. After 28 days, you test them for compression, right? You put them in a compression machine, you test them, and you tell us the characteristic compressive strength. That is nothing but your FCK, your strength which is acquired by your concrete after 28 days is your characteristic compressive strength. So that is termed as FCK, or it is denoted as FCK. Okay. So the sampling and strength test of concrete, as per section 16 of IS 1343/2012. So this section 16 of your IS code 1343/2012 gives us how you have to sample your concrete and how you have to strength test it for compression. So yeah, you can go through this section 16 and you can have an idea of how you need to sample your concrete and how you need to perform your strength test for compression. Okay, and how you can get a characteristic compressive strength. Also, this code IS 1343/2012 has this table number 1. Okay, table number 1 giving your grades of concrete, giving your grades of concrete. So you can see this is a screenshot from your IS 1343/2012. So you can see grade designation. You can see these are the grade designations, and this is the specified characteristic strength in compression of 150 cubes at 28 days. Okay, at 28 days in Newton per squared. So if the characteristic strength is 30 Newton per squared, you grade it as M30. Okay, if it is 35 Newton per square, you grade it as M35. Okay, and it goes on continuing up to M80. You can see the grade, you can see it is going up to M80, which is very high, very high. So M80, what is the characteristic strength? If the grade is designated as M80, it is 80 Newton per mm squared. Okay, so whatever the number is mentioned here, that is nothing but your characteristic strength at 28 days in Newton per mm squared. Suppose it is M60, so your characteristic strength will be uh, 60 Newton per mm squared, right? So that is what is your FCK. So this is regarding your compressive strength of your concrete, compressive strength. So coming to your tensile strength of your concrete. You know the concrete is weak in tension, but still we need to account for the tensile strength of your concrete. So tensile strength of your concrete can be expressed in the following ways. You can see there are three methods of how you can find your tensile strength and mention your tensile strength. Your first is your flexural tensile strength. Flexural tensile strength, and how it is determined? It is determined by testing your concrete beams under 2-point loading. Right? You have studied 2-point loading, wherein you have a beam, concrete beam, and you put it under 2-point loading, and you put your loads, and your load corresponding to your cracking failure of your beam is your flexural tensile strength, right? The load corresponding to the cracking and failing of your beam is your corresponding flexural tensile strength. So you put your concrete beam under 2-point loading and you test it, and you determine the flexural tensile strength. So coming to your second one is your splitting tensile strength. Splitting tensile strength. You have done this in your lab, I guess. So wherein you have a concrete cylinder, right? Concrete cylinder of 150 mm dia and 300 mm in height, right? 150 mm dia, 300 mm height. So what you do is you put your the cylinder in your compression machine, right? In your compression machine. Let me just draw. So this is your cylinder. This is a cylinder. Just a rough diagram I'm drawing here. So this is a cylinder, and what you do is you apply your compression throughout in this fashion. In this fashion, you apply your compression in a diametric way. In a diametric way. So this is how you apply compression, and what happens is your concrete will crack. It will crack. So how it will crack? Let me just show. It will crack this way. It will crack in this fashion. So your load corresponding to this crack is what is your splitting tensile strength, right? So your load corresponding to your splitting load is your splitting tensile strength. So this is how you carry forward your splitting tensile strength. So coming to your third is your direct tensile strength. So direct tensile strength is pretty difficult to perform, but it is done in your research purposes, right? It is done for your research purposes, wherein you have rectangular specimen, wherein you have rectangular concrete specimen, and you put it under direct tension, right? How you put your steel member in your tensile machine and you stretch it in the similar way. What we do, we put our concrete rectangular specimen under direct tension, and the load corresponding to your splitting of your concrete member is what is your direct tensile strength, right? So these are the three methods how you can determine your tensile strength of your concrete. So if there is absence of test results, right? If there you have no test results with you, the code recommends to use an ultimate estimate of the flexural tensile strength from the corresponding from the compressive strength by the following equation. So if you have your FCK value with you, if you have FCK value with you, you can determine your tensile strength. You can determine your flexural tensile strength, okay, by using the following formula. So whenever you do not have test results with you, you can use this formula and you can determine the flexural tensile strength. So your flexural tensile strength FCR, okay, your flexural tensile strength FCR is given by 0.7 root FCK, right? 0.7 root FCK. FCK is your characteristic compressive strength of your cube. So it is given by 0.7 root FCK, wherein FCK is your characteristic compressive strength of cube in Newton per mm squared. Okay, Newton per mm squared is your unit, and your flexural tensile strength will also be given in Newton per mm squared. So you can use this formula in absence of your test results. So this was regarding your strength of your concrete. Your first property which we studied was your strength of concrete. Now the second property which we will study is the stiffness of concrete. Stiffness of concrete. So coming to stiffness of concrete, the stiffness of concrete is required to estimate the deflection in members, right? The more the stiff is your concrete, the lesser is your deflection. So it is inversely proportional. If your concrete is more stiff, your deflection is lesser. So how do you determine the stiffness? So stiffness is given by modulus of elasticity, right? Modulus of elasticity, which we denote as E, right? Which we denote it as capital E. So stiffness is given by modulus of elasticity. So for non-linear stress versus strain behavior of concrete, right? You can see in this graph, you can see it is a stress. It is stress. This is stress, right? F denotes stress and C denotes concrete, right? F denotes stress and C denotes concrete. So this axis is stress and this axis is strain, wherein epsilon denotes your strain. Epsilon is for strain and C is for concrete. So this is strain for concrete. This axis is for strain. So whenever we have a non-linear stress strain curve, so this is a non-linear stress strain curve of your concrete, and we have three methods wherein you can determine your modulus of elasticity. You have your initial modulus, then we have your tangential modulus, and you have your secant modulus. Okay, so secant, you have three methods wherein how you can determine your modulus of elasticity, that is initial modulus, tangential modulus, and secant modulus. So what your IS 1343/2012. So this code recommends to use secant modulus. Secant modulus, it recommends secant modulus at a stress level of 0.3 FCK. So let me just explain how the secant modulus is determined at a stress level of 0.3 FCK. So you can see in this stress strain graph, what we do is we mark this 0.3 FCK. We mark this 0.3 FCK. Suppose it is this point. Suppose it is this point. So what we do, we join this point and your 0 point or your initial point. We join these points. So what this gives us? This gives us a secant modulus. Secant modulus, by joining these 2 points by a straight line, this gives us a secant modulus. So how do we determine the secant modulus? By taking the slope of this line, by taking the slope of this dotted line. So this slope of this line is nothing but your secant modulus, which is denoted by your EC, right? EC. So secant modulus EC is given by joining this 0.3 FCK and your 0 point, and by taking the slope of this straight line. So this is how you determine the stiffness of our concrete. Stiffness of our concrete, it is given by modulus of elasticity, and what we use as per your code is secant modulus. We do not use initial and we do not use tangential, but we use secant modulus for your stiffness and modulus of elasticity, which is recommended by your IS 13/2012, IS 1343/2012 code. So this is regarding stiffness of concrete. So what is stiffness? Stiffness is your resistance to deformation. Resistance to deformation. So more the stiffness, more is the lesser is the deflection. Lesser is the deflection. So what we need? We need higher modulus of elasticity. We need higher modulus of elasticity. So more the modulus of elasticity, more is the stiffness of your concrete, and lesser will be the deflection of your concrete. Okay, so this is your requirements of your stiffness of your concrete. So we need more stiffness, or we need more stiff concrete. So this is regarding your second property of your concrete, which is stiffness of concrete. Second property we have studied is stiffness. First property we have studied is strength of concrete. Second property which we have studied is your stiffness of concrete. Coming to your next thing under stiffness, is if there is if we want to determine your stiffness without having to draw this graph, right? Without from this graph, if we want to determine your modulus of elasticity, we can use this formula, right? We can use this formula, but this formula gives us only for short-term loading, modulus of elasticity for short-term loading, by neglecting the effect of creep, So this is just for short-term loading. So EC, or your elastic modulus of elasticity, is given by 5000 root FCK, right? 5000 root FCK, wherein FCK is your characteristic compressive strength of cubes in Newton per mm squared, and the value of EC is also in Newton per mm squared. Okay, so this is how you can determine your modulus of elasticity for short-term loading, neglecting the effect of creep. So this formula is there in your code book also. This formula is there in your code book. So coming to your next property, which is the durability of concrete, right? Durability is required so that your concrete has a larger life cycle, right? Larger lifespan, and hence it requires, if your concrete is more durable, it will not require any maintenance, and it will not require any repair, right? As your concrete ages. So durability is an important factor, right, in your life cycle cost of a structure. Life cycle cost. So your life cycle cost not only includes your initial cost of materials and labor, but it also includes your repair and maintenance cost, right? So what we need durable concrete so that our repair and maintenance is lesser. So our cost of repair and maintenance is lesser. So durability of concrete is defined as its ability to resist weathering action. Okay, so the ability to resist weathering action, to resist your chemical attack, to resist your abrasion and other any other process of deterioration. So the ability of your concrete to resist all of this is nothing but your durability. So a common durability problems in concrete are as follows, right? Common durability. Let us just look into a few common durability problems in concrete. So sulfate and other chemical attacks on concrete. So that is one major concern, wherein your sulfate and other chemical attacks start to deteriorate your concrete. So after your concrete starts to deteriorate, your steel, which is embedded in your concrete, is exposed to this sulfate and other chemicals. So your steel starts to corrode and deteriorate, and what that will cause in the end is it will cause your failure of your structure. So the durability is important. So coming to your second point, alkali aggregate reaction. So wherein your aggregate, if they are reactive to this alkali which is present in concrete, right? Alkalis are present in your environment, and some amount of alkalis are present in your concrete. And if your aggregates which are placed in concrete are reactive to this alkali, they start reacting with each other, and they form this alkali aggregate reaction. And what in ultimately they cause swelling in your concrete. And what that swelling does is it starts cracking up your concrete. And once crack starts to occur, moisture and other chemical will ingress into your concrete and will cause more deterioration. So that is one durability problem regarding concrete. Coming to your third problem is your freezing and thawing action that occurs in your cold regions, right? Wherein there is snowfall occurring, and when the water which is getting into your concrete starts to freeze. And when it freezes, the volume of water increases as it freezes. So as a volume increases, it will expand in volume, and it will cause cracks in your concrete. So that is one important factor wherein freezing and thawing causes damage. And this is only regarding in your cold regions, wherein you have ice, and you have very cold regions wherein your water is turned into ice, and wherein your snowfall occurs, right? So this is freezing and thawing damage in concrete. So coming to your fourth point, So fourth point is regarding corrosion of steel bars and tendons, right? It is the main point wherein your steel and your tendon starts to corrode, and when that occurs, your steels will fail, and when your steel will fail, your entire structure will fail. So the one more important thing is in your PSC members, the amount of steel compared to your RCC structure is lesser. The steel is lesser in pre-stressed members compared to your RCC members. So it is more concern whenever we are dealing with corrosion of steel in PSC. So we need our concrete to be more durable so that the corrosion of steel bars and tendons in your PSC elements do not occur. So these are a few common durability problems in concrete, okay, which we have seen. So coming to your next point, the durability of concrete is intrinsically related to water tightness or permeability, right? Durability is directly related to its water tightness or permeability. So if your concrete is very watertight, it is non-permeable. If it does not allow any water or any other substance to get into the concrete, what we call that concrete to be very durable, right? Hence the concrete should have low permeability and there should be adequate cover for reinforcing bar. So that is the main thing for why we provide cover, right? We provide cover because to protect our reinforcing bars from our environment and other chemicals. So that is why we provide cover. So adequate cover needs to be provided and our concrete should have low permeability. So that is our prerequisite of our high strength concrete. Then coming to our next point, the selection of proper materials and good quality control are essential for durability of concrete. So not only providing your proper cover, the selection of materials, right? Proper selection of materials and good quality control, right? Quality control on your site is important for durability of concrete. So if you use proper materials based on your environmental conditions, right? If there is more sulfate and more of chloride in your environment wherein you are going to place your concrete, proper materials need to be taken place. Proper materials need to be taken into account for a construction of your concrete, wherein it can resist your sulfate and chemical and other chemical attacks like your chloride attacks. So proper material selection is one important thing, and good quality control wherein your proportioning is proper at site, and placing, compaction, finishing, curing, all those things need to be properly controlled and they need to be properly executed in site. So these are essential parts of your durability. If all these things are properly done, your concrete will be more durable. Okay, so remember these points. So coming to your next point, that is your durability is properly addressed, right? If you want to read for durability of your PSC members, you can refer to section 8. You can refer to section 8 of IS 1343/2012. Okay, if you want to read about durability of PSC members, you can read this section 8. Then next, table 4 of your IS 1343 specifies the maximum water to cement ratio and the minimum cement content for different exposure conditions, right? So in in IS 456 to 2000, IS 456 2000, which you have used for RCC, or right, you have used for plain concrete and reinforced concrete. So IS 456 2000, wherein you have a table number 5, right? Table number 5, wherein it gives you for different exposure conditions the different water cement ratios and the different maximum and minimum cement content that you need to use along with your covers, right? For different exposure conditions, it gives you the cement content, that maximum and minimum cement content that you have to use, and the free water cement ratio which you have to adopt, it gives you, and the cover that you have to adopt, right? So that is given in your table number 5 in your IS 456 2000. So similarly, we have a table number 4 in our IS 1343, which gives us the as per your exposure condition, it gives us the maximum water cement ratio and the minimum cement content to be used. So I have just taken a screenshot of that table and I have placed it here. So you can see table number 4 gives us the minimum cement content, right? Minimum cement content, the maximum water cement ratio, and the minimum grade of concrete which is required for your different exposure conditions, right? We can see in your table, we can see various exposure conditions starting from mild and going up to extreme. Mild, moderate, severe, very severe, and extreme, right? Similar, you can see a table in your IS 15 in your IS 456. So, okay, for pre-stressed concrete, you can see it gives us minimum cement content in kg per meter cube, right? And it gives maximum free water to cement ratio, and it gives us the minimum grade of concrete to be used. So, for an example, if we are in severe exposure condition, the minimum cement content that we need to use is 320 kg per meter cube, and the maximum free water cement ratio that we need to use is 0.45, and the minimum grade of concrete that we need to use is M30. So this table helps us in determining the minimum grade of concrete, the maximum free water to cement ratio, and the minimum cement content required. So this table is very helpful. Remember table number 4 in your IS 1343. So this is related to durability, right? Exposure condition and your minimum grade of concrete based on your exposure condition. So these are regarding your durability, So we have studied your the fourth point, that is your durability of concrete, and moving on to your next property of concrete, that is the stress strain curves for your concrete. Very important point, very important property of your concrete. That is, we need to study your stress strain curves. So first that we need to study is your curve under uniaxial compression. Okay, curve under uniaxial compression we will study, and then we will study under uniaxial tension. Okay, so first what we will study is curve under uniaxial compression. So the stress strain behavior of concrete under uniaxial compression is initially linear. Okay, initially linear. So let me just show you this curve. This curve is taken from your IS 1343. This curve is taken from your IS 1343. So let us just concentrate on this first curve now. Okay, just concentrate on this first curve. So you can see this is your stress axis. This is your stress axis, and this is your strain axis. Okay, strain axis for your concrete. So you can see initially the stress strain curve is straight. Okay, it is straight and it is elastic. It is stress is proportional to strain. So stress is proportional to strain and it is elastic. That is, once your strain is recovered after unloading up to your proportionality limit. So once you unload your structure, all of your strain is recovered, meaning it is elastic. So your stress strain curve is linear and elastic in the initial stage. You can see it is straight and it is elastic. It is strain is proportional to stress is proportional to strain. But later on you can see with the generation of micro cracks, right? Once your micro cracks start to generate after you increase your load, there will be generation of micro cracks, and the behavior becomes non-linear and inelastic. So initially it was linear and elastic, but after certain amount of load, increase in your load, there will be micro cracks, and the curve you can see becomes non-linear and inelastic. You can see it is not straight and it is not elastic. It will become non-linear and elastic. It will form a parabolic curve. So IS 1343 1980 recommends a parabolic characteristic stress strain curve. You can see a parabolic stress strain curve here for concrete under uniaxial compression. So figure 3 in your code is this figure. Figure 3 in your IS 1343 is this curve. You can see. So parabolic curve will be followed up to a strain level of 0.002. You can see up to 0.002 your parabolic curve is there, and after this you can see the stress is constant, but a strain goes on increasing. and your stress become constant. So at this point, that is at a strain level of 0.002, your stress becomes constant and your strain goes on increasing. So and it we consider your stress value only up to a strain value of 0.0035, because after this value you can see that the curve has become straight, right? So we consider a strain value of maximum of 0.0035. So for design purposes, what we do is the compressive strength of concrete in the structure shall be assumed to be 0.67 times of the characteristic strength. So let me just explain this point in your figure. So this is your characteristic strength, right? And this is FCK, right? This is your stress strain curve, and it is coming up to a value of coming up to a characteristic strength of FCK, right? FCK. It is a characteristic strength. But in while designing, what we do is we do not adopt the entire characteristic strength FCK, but what we do, we assume that only 67% of your characteristic strength is used. Okay, only 67% of your characteristic strength is used, and what we do, we use only 67% of your characteristic strength. So this will be a 67% of your curve. Okay. So this is what is your design curve, what we call design curve, wherein we assume only 67% of your concrete concrete shall attain only 67% of your characteristic strength. It will not attain 100% characteristic strength. It will not, your concrete will not attain 100% characteristic strength. It will only attain 67% of your characteristic strength. This is what we assume for your design purpose, for your safety. Then what we do again, we apply a partial safety factor of 1.5. You can see we have to adopt a partial safety factor of 1.5, and what we do is we divide this 0.67 FCK by our partial safety factor. What we do, we divide this entire curve by your partial safety factor. That is, you can see here your 0.67 FCK is divided by your partial safety factor, that is 1.5, and we get this curve. Because we have divided this entire curve by your partial safety factor, that is 1.5. Okay, 1.5 is our partial safety factor. So this will almost be equal to 0.43. Okay, 0.43 FCK, 0.43 FCK. So this is what we use in our design, 0.43 FCK. That is what we use in our design. So remember this. So this is regarding your normal concrete. Now coming to your high strength concrete. High strength concrete under uniaxial compression. So you can see that your ascending branch, this is your ascending branch, and this is your descending branch. Both of these are very steep, right? Your ascending and descending branches are steep whenever we are dealing with high strength concrete curve. Okay, so this is your stress axis, this is your strain axis, and when we plot a stress strain curve for a high strength concrete, we can see that the ascending part is very steep, and also this descending part is also very steep. Yeah, so this is the difference between a normal stress strain curve for a normal concrete and your stress strain curve for your high strength concrete. So what we can do is for determining the stress in your concrete, we can use this formula. We can use this big formula, which is developed by these three scientists, right? Which is developed by these three gentlemen, and this formula can be used for determining the stress in your concrete. So this is given by FC is equal to FCK multiplied by n whole multiplied by epsilon C. That is epsilon C denotes concrete, epsilon denotes strain, right? Strain in concrete, by strain initial, right? Strain epsilon naught, right? Epsilon naught is your strain corresponding to FCK. Whole divided by n minus 1 plus epsilon C divided by epsilon naught, which is raised to n into k. So let us just look into what these individual notations are. So FC denotes a compressive strength. FC, which is here, is our compressive strength. We need to determine our compressive strength of your concrete, high strength concrete. So FCK is nothing but your characteristic compressive strength of in Newton per mm squared, right? And what is this N? What is this N? Right? We have N here, and we have N here, and we have N here. So what is this N? N is nothing but ECI divided by whole divided by ECI minus ES. So what is this ECI and what is this ES? These are nothing but modulus of elasticities by different methods. Modulus of elasticity by different methods. So let me just explain it here. So you can see ECI here is ECI. It is modulus of elasticity by initial modulus. It is by using initial modulus. So in initial, what we do, we just draw a straight line. We just draw a tangent to this curve at this point, right? A tangent is drawn initially at this curve, which is at your starting point. So the slope of this line is nothing but your ECI. The slope of this line is nothing but your ECI. So nothing. Next part is your ES. ES is nothing but your secant modulus, wherein you have this FCK point here, right? The topmost point. You join this point and your 0 point, and we draw a straight line. We join these 2 points by using a straight line, and the slope of this straight line is nothing but your ES or your secant modulus of elasticity. This is our initial modulus of elasticity. This is our secant modulus of elasticity. So that is nothing but, here you can see this is your initial modulus of elasticity. This is also initial modulus of elasticity. This is your secant modulus of elasticity. So you can see we are using two types of modulus of elasticity whenever we are dealing with high strength concrete. Okay, so coming to your next. So epsilon C is your compressive strain in concrete, and epsilon naught is nothing but your strain corresponding to FCK. So your FCK value is this your highest point, and the corresponding strain to your FCK is nothing but your epsilon naught. Okay, epsilon naught. So strain corresponding to FCK. What is your K, right? You can see a K value here. You can see a K term over here. So what is K? So K is equal to 1. K is equal to 1 whenever we are dealing with this part of our curve, your ascending part of your curve. Whenever we want to find the FC value in this ascending part of our curve, we have to use K equal to 1 whenever we are dealing with the equation wherein your EC is lesser than E naught. Whenever your EC is lesser than E naught, we are dealing with the ascending part of the curve, and we have to use K value as 1. You can see EC value is lesser than E naught. We have to use K value as 1. And whenever we are dealing with the descending part of the curve, whenever we are dealing with this descending part of the curve, that is your EC is greater than E naught. EC is greater than E naught, or your descending part of the curve, what you have to use? You have to use this formula for determining K. We have to use this formula for determining K, which is 0.67 plus FCK divided by 77.5. Okay, so whenever we are dealing with the ascending part of the curve, we have to use K value as 1, and whenever we are dealing with descending part of the curve, we have to use K value from this formula, that is 0.67 plus so FCK divided by 77.5. Okay, so I have told you ECI is your initial modulus, and ES is your secant modulus. Okay, so I have told you and I have explained how we can find out this initial modulus and your secant modulus. So this is all the terms that are there in your formula, and this formula you can use to find out the stress at any point of your curve, stress in your concrete at any point of your curve. Okay, so this formula is given by these three scientists, remember. So this is regarding your high strength concrete, your stress strain curves in uniaxial compression, right? High strength concrete under uniaxial compression, and this is the stress strain curve for your high strength concrete under uniaxial compression. So this is very important regarding your exam, right? They ask to explain your stress strain curve for high strength concrete. Okay, so you have to draw this curve, you have to explain all these terms, and you have to write this formula down, and you have to explain what all of these terms are. Okay, so this is your stress strain curve for your high strength concrete. So coming to your next part under stress strain curve, that is curve under tension. So what we have studied in your previous curves, those were for compression. Now this curve is for your tension. So your concrete, your stress strain behavior of concrete under uniaxial tension is linear elastic initially. You can see it is linear and it is elastic. It is straight and it is elastic initially. But coming to cracking, coming close to cracking, what it does is it becomes non-linear. It becomes non-linear and becomes descending. It becomes non-linear and it becomes descending. This is your stress axis and this is your strain axis. You can see this is your concrete element which is under tension. Which is under tension. You can see it is under tension. So this is your stress strain curve for your concrete under tension. So remember, this is very easy. It is linear and elastic in the initial stage, and when it comes to cracking, it becomes non-linear and it becomes descending. Okay, it becomes descending. So this is regarding your stress strain curves for your concrete under compression and under tension. So coming to creep of concrete, So what we will do is this creep of concrete, and the next thing, that is your shrinkage of concrete, we will study in your next class. Creep and shrinkage I will explain in your next class. So today what we have studied is we have studied the creep of concrete. Then we have studied your stress. We have not studied creep of concrete. We have studied stress strain curves for your concrete under compression and under tension. Then we have studied durability of concrete, right? We have studied durability of concrete. We have studied. Okay, hello.
So your tension curve is same for both the normal concrete and the high strength concrete, sir?
Yes, this curve what they have shown is for normal concrete as well as for high strength concrete, right? So this is the same behavior. Yeah, the same behavior you will see for normal concrete and for high strength concrete as well. So this curve is both for high strength concrete and for normal concrete as well. Okay, so you can draw this curve and you can mention that. Okay, so we have studied what we have studied. We have studied stress strain curve for concrete under compression and under tension. We have studied durability of concrete. We have studied stiffness of concrete, and we have studied strength of concrete. And under strength of concrete, we have studied compressive strength and we have studied tensile strength. Okay, how do we determine and what is the formula for both of those? So these are a few properties which we have studied today. And in the next class, what we will do, we will study creep and we will study shrinkage property of concrete. And after we finish up with properties of concrete, we will head on next into your properties of steel. Okay, we will study properties of steel in our next class. We will study properties of steel and we will study a few properties which we have left in properties of hardened concrete. So along with this, we have studied the four methods of post tensioning, right? We have studied the four systems of post tensioning, that is Freycinet system, then your Magnell-Blatten system, then your Gifford-Udall system, and your Lee-Meckel system. So if you have any doubts regarding any of the properties of hardened concrete which I have studied today, or any of the systems of post tensioning, you are free to ask now. We have time. We will have some 2 minutes for discussion. So you can type in chat, or what you can do is you can unmute and you can ask. So you have both the options. So until until that occurs, until you can others ask your doubts, what others can do is you can just type in your attendance in chat. You can others can type in your attendance, and those who have doubts can ask. Simultaneously, both can be done. So quickly type in your attendance, and simultaneously, if you have any doubts, you can unmute and you can ask. Okay, so from your exam point of view, these properties of concrete and steel, right? From your exam point of view, the properties of steel and concrete which you are studying is not very important. It is not very frequently asked in your external exams. But from your syllabus point of view, right? From a syllabus point of view and a subject point of view, it is very important to study these properties of your concrete and steel. So I am stressing on this properties of concrete and steel more, because once you understand how the properties of your concrete and steel are, you will easily understand how they are used in your pre-stressing works, right? So you need to understand the properties of your concrete and your steel. So it is very important with respect to your syllabus and your subject point of view. But when it comes to your exam point of view, it is not very important. Okay, so you need not worry if you have not completely understood your properties of concrete and steel. Okay, so that is there. So I hope everyone has typed in their attendance.